Hello, my name is Kaylin Huntress, and today I'm going to tell you about this amazing new book that I just read, Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. I loved reading this book. I loved it so much that I caught myself not reading this book because I didn't want it to be over too soon. I had time set aside to read and I was like, no, I can't read this because I'll be done too soon. And I realized, I could just read this again. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm reading it again. This is a fantastic book. And in this book review, I'm not going to talk about what's going on in Elizabeth Gilbert's personal life because I have complicated feelings about what's happening in her life. And if this was a review of Committed, her previous book, then I would talk about it, but it's actually one of the reasons I found myself not reading it is because of what's going on in her life. And so I'm going to leave that aside and just talk about the book. Reading her books, it feels a little bit like being her therapist because she's so intimate about her experience, and the stories she tells they're so personal, and so it's kind of hard to divorce the the person from the work. And so keep that in mind that her life it's the source of this material, and so that's why I find it hard to kind of not talk about what's going on in her life. However, her life as an artist has been through so much. She's been a practicing writer for a long time now. She shares how when she was really young, she made a deal with herself that she was going to be a writer no matter what, whether she was successful or not, whether it could support her or not. And she has this great perspective that you shouldn't demand that your creativity also provide you with a living. And that's really healthy, I think. Most of the artistic projects I've had that were squashed were because I tried to make them profitable way too soon. And when I read her perspective, that she was willing to be an artist no matter what, whether or not it made her a living, that gave me a really clear respect for her outlook on her own creativity. And so seeing her look back on her relationship to creativity over all these years, I mean, there's so much good stuff in here. So if you're an artist or a maker of any kind, I highly recommend you read it. I love how she talks about that you enter into a contract with a project. And when you have a project come around in your life, you court each other for a little bit. You check each other out. You go on a couple of first dates. But when you decide it's time to really work together, you clear space. You clear your calendar. You start dedicating portions of your life to making this idea manifest. And the way she talks about it, I really resonate to because I find myself going through a lot of these same stages of relationship that she describes. And I also really like how she thinks of ideas as having will. That ideas themselves, they can decide whether or not you're worth it. And that if you don't keep up your end of the bargain, then they can leave and go somewhere else. And she tells this really great story in here. I'm not going to give you any details because it's a magical story and you got to read it. It's about this book that she never wrote. She actually started writing it and she got far in the process and her life changed and then she came back to it and the idea wasn't there anymore. The spark wasn't there anymore. And the idea left and went somewhere else. And it's a really great story. And she isn't bitter about that idea going somewhere else and finding some other artist to be manifested through. And I think that's also a really healthy relationship for an artist to have with an idea. Because I'm sure you've seen somebody else made a business out of an idea you had or wrote a book with an idea that you had. And when she sees that happen, she's like, great, I'm glad you found somebody to bring you into creation. Good for you. And that's so much more healthy than getting upset and holding on to that bitterness. And she talks a lot about the tormented artist stereotype, that it can be easy for people to fall into, and it sucks to live that way. To always be in a contentious relationship with your work and your audience. And she goes through what it does for people and what it doesn't do for people. And when she lays it all out side by side, being a tormented artist, it's not a good life. And she has this great description of the Muse sitting in the corner of an artist's studio waiting for the artist to finish up with his tantrum so that they can get back to work. And that's what ideas want, they want to be made. And if the artist is willing to do the work, then the muse will come and help you do it. Now, she totally recognizes that her idea that ideas are separate, conscious entities could be completely delusional. And she says that's okay. Because if it's practical, if it helps me make my art and it helps me stay sane in my day-to-day life, why not? And it's not a new idea. The ancient Greeks had a word for daimons, these spirits that would come around and influence us just by their presence. And the Romans, they didn't think that you are a genius. They think that you have a genius. And they looked at it as this spiritual entity that would, come and live in your house. And if you were nice enough to it, then every once in a while it would come around and find you working and help you make some amazing stuff. And I really like that idea that genius isn't something that we are obligated to bring out of ourselves. All we have to do is make it welcome. And if we're good enough as artists, we practice our craft, we stay in a good space, sometimes those geniuses find us and they gift us with the ability to create some really amazing things. And that's big magic. It's a fantastic book. I highly recommend it. So if you like to make stuff, if you like to set aside time just to play with your own creativity, this is a really good read, and I think you're going to like it a lot.